So I did a video, I think it was back in 2021, May 27, 2021, right here, talking about, hey, how about that housing market crash? Let me pull this over. This one was called, so about that real estate crash. Let's talk about the housing market crash. And of course, it's in quotes. And it was because there wasn't going to be a crash. And I had put in another video talking about that the government was just going to inflate the debt away. And everybody was talking about how there was going to be this ridiculous crash. And so I want you to take a look. So this is where the market pivoted. And there's a reason why the market pivoted over and why the market collapsed exactly on this day, Tuesday, June 16th. Excuse me, this was August 16th, 2022. So something happened during this period, right? From basically the end of June to the beginning of August, right? And so there was Joe Biden had kept talking about, right? President signs the Inflation Reduction Act. And of course, everybody knew or should have known that just because it's called the Inflation Reduction Act doesn't mean that it was going to reduce inflation. In fact, it was going to cause inflation, and that's exactly what it did. And so a lot of that inflation went into the stock market. And so this is why I say that the stock market is a Ponzi scheme. It's not based off of supply and demand of goods and services per se. It's based off of liquidity. It's based off of the Federal Reserve creating liquidity. And so when there's more dollars that are being put into the system, and this is what the federal government was doing, that is going to eventually going to cause inflation. It may go into one certain spot in one certain space, but as the people who end up getting the money go out and spend that money into the economy, and then trickles down to other people, it creates jobs that perhaps wouldn't be created. And then that money gets spent into the overall economy. And I want you to take a look at the day, right? Today, President Joe Biden signed into law what is called the Inflation Reduction Act. And this was August 16th, 2022. The exact same day that, in essence, this is what they call in stock market, buy the rumor, sell the news. So the rumor was that the government was going to print more money. And so the market rallied, knowing that the government was going to print more money under the Inflation Reduction Act. And you can see right where my cursor is that this day is August of 2022, the 16th of August. The 16th of August. And so after the news came out the following week, right, August 2022, you can see it right here. This is the 17th. We're going to look over the 22nd is right here, right? And this is why the stock market fell. I wonder if you can see it over here. Let me remove myself. Perhaps you can't see it. So it's right here. This is August 20. This is right here. This day right here. This red candle right here. So this is why the market fell right here on this candle. Monday, the 22nd. So this is what they call buy the rumor, sell the news, because they perceived that the government was going to create more liquidity, and they did. And so this is why the stock market rallied. This is why the stock market rallied. And the reason that it broke down and sold off was because the news was confirmed. And so the money was already made based off of that. The market was going to trade higher. And so for a lot of people who were saying, oh, there's no way that the federal government is, they're fighting inflation. They're keeping rates high. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense because the market follows liquidity. If the government is going to create more currency, and the government was doing this, going to war, this is why the market didn't fall. Because eventually that money will find its way into the economy somehow. Whether the wealthy people will go out and they'll start buying boats, then those people who sell the boats, well, then they'll go out and buy food, and they'll go on vacations, and they'll go out and do stuff. That money eventually starts to trickle into the economy. And so it takes time for that inflation to then find its way into the economy. And then the people who are poor, the working class people, they get that money. And then what do? They go out and buy iPhones. They go out and pay rent. They go out and go to McDonald's, or they go out and buy stuff from IKEA. And it causes, and some people will take that money and some people will invest it into the stock market. And so eventually a good amount of that money finds its way back into the market, because once the people who get the money in the beginning, well, then they're going to chase a yield. They're going to want a yield on the return of their money. So they've gotten all this money. Well, they know that the federal government is going to print more of it, and this is what you see going on with Ukraine and with all these different wars, and everybody's getting money and bailouts. And so they know that the government is going to devalue the currency by printing more of the currency. So it goes here. It goes into the stock market. It goes into real estate. And this is why how price of housing doesn't go down, because the government just keeps on injecting more and more liquidity. And so if you believe the narrative, the housing prices are going to collapse. I see all these videos talking about, the housing market is going to collapse. I think Valuetainment did a video that got like over 500,000 views talking about, the federal government, they're fighting inflation. There's no way they're going to cut rates because the stock market is going to go like Venezuela. And of course, none of that is actually happening. The government was never fighting inflation. The government wanted inflation. They wanted inflation so that they can inflate their debt away. This is why I said this back during the pandemic in like 2020 or 2021. I said this a long time ago. And so I kept investing. I kept investing. All these tech stocks that were falling and all these dividend stocks that have been falling, I have been buying them up. And this is why I say that what you see on the internet or on YouTube is what you're meant to see. There's all these people talking about how market's going to crash, or they base stuff, this company got this earnings. Most of that stuff is irrelevant. What matters is, where's the liquidity going to go? The only place that it can go is into the stock market or into real estate. There are only so many places that the inflation can go to, because for wealthy people, there's only so many boats you can buy. There's only so many houses you can buy. There's only so many vacations that you can take. And then the money just ends up going right back into the stock market, because they understand that the government is going to devalue whatever wealth that they have acquired. And so if they don't get a yield on it, well, then however much the government creates inflation, well, then they're going to lose that. If they just stuck that money in the bank, they know that they're going to lose whatever percent that whatever percentage of currency that the government re-injects into the economy. This is why Jerome Powell was talking about, we want 2% every year. As we're trying to get back to that percentage. And of course, how he gets there, no one knows. He don't even know. It's just a narrative. It's just a narrative to keep rates high after the government created all the inflation, and then they squeeze other countries so that those people who are in debt, the people who want to buy commodities, etc., their liquidity dries up, and it devalues their currency, which in essence devalues the labor of the people in their country, because that's what they do. They take a portion of their labor and they go out and buy dollars so that they can buy commodities, so that they can go out and buy oil for the country, so that they can go out and buy corn, wheat, meat, whatever they need to import. And then the federal government prints 40% of all dollars that have ever existed in one time within Trump's presidency. And of course, it causes massive inflation as Americans are consuming all the products that are made overseas. And so it causes inflation overseas because now they want to get hold of those dollars, and so prices remain high. And because they know that liquidity is out there, there's no reason for prices to come down, because they know the liquidity will eventually go into the system. And this is what continues to cause inflation. And so if you don't have a good skill, this is why I put out that video that in that one talking about it, that if you didn't have a skill that would increase with the rate of inflation, then you would be left behind by automation. And this is why I said, this is why the video I did before that in 2021, talking about that the inflation would lead to automation. Just look what's happening in California, right? The fight for 15. Now the people are making over 20, and they still can't. They still can't make ends meet. And so what did McDonald's do? They're automating, right? This is what This is what Amazon is doing. And so as the people continue to call for more welfare and more socialism, the people will drive themselves out of the market. Because whatever skills that can be done by automation will. This is why if you could do graphic design, Chat GPT will take your job. And if you don't learn how to use it, or if you don't have a skill that's necessary, which is why it's important if you're considering a trade, if you're considering a job, to get into the trades, because that's where automation currently can't replace you. But as more people enter into those fields, you'll see the value of the salaries of those things go down, just like you saw with like travel nursing during the pandemic, just like in the very beginning with truck drivers. Truck drivers were talking about, they were making so much money, and then a whole bunch of people went into trucking. And then now there's no need for truck drivers because everything that needed to be shipped got shipped. And so a lot of those people got cut off. Just look, that's exactly what happened to, what was it? Yellow Trucking Company. And they went out of business because they saw it. They're like, oh shit, look at all this money in trucking. Let's start a truck driver business. Let's go balls deep in. And then it all disappeared because it's all fake. It's all based off of liquidity. It has nothing to do necessarily with supply and demand. This is why these people understand this. When is the Fed going to print more money? Well, the Inflation Reduction Act. Let me read that. Oh, what, they're going to print how much? This is why I said when you look back at 2022 at what the debt was, it was 31 trillion, and it's almost 34 now. That means within 1 year, the government added almost $3 trillion of spending. So should you be surprised that the stock market didn't come down? Should you be surprised that housing hasn't come down when the government just literally printed in 1 year almost $3 trillion, and the year's not even over? This is why, there's going to come a point in time where America will experience the inflation when more countries don't want to do business with the dollar because they can find something that is an alternative. The level of poverty that you're going to see in the United States will be unmatched. And during that time period will probably be the most dangerous period in the United States history because the people will call for welfare. And just like what happened in France, when the French were told that we needed to cut spending because we can't afford for you to retire at 59 or whatever it was, 58. And then the people almost burned down the city. And Americans have guns. And that's why you see many of these countries are so worried and they're going the route of surveillance because they know inevitably when the currency collapses that the people will turn on the government and they will want their pound of flesh. So you see right now, the people are content. As long as you can keep the people content, the chances of a revolution is very small. And this is why you see them going to war. This is why, who was it? Joe Biden was on TV talking about that. Ukraine war, the Israeli war. It's so important because they understand that if they can't keep up this Ponzi scheme, that the people are going to execute them. The amount of chaos and destruction and death that will be seen, and it will be seen in many countries because America will go to war. It'll find a country to go to war with, like Mexico. This is why Mexico was like, shit, I want to go to BRICS too. And then they looked over at Mexico, and I forgot who was the dude, where they were like, maybe we need to send the Marines in there to look into that fentanyl. It was letting Mexico know. Don't get any ideas. Because if push comes to shove, we will invade you under whatever pretense that we need. And that is the reality of what is going on right now.